You're listening to Halfway There, episode number 191, Harriett Miller and a Fierce Faith. This one hits close to home. It's my grandma, guys. Welcome to Halfway There. This is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. I'm your host, Eric Nevins. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't had a chance, go out to halfwaytherepodcast.com. There's a little button there that says Patreon, and you can click on that. And if you want to support what we do here, if you want to keep it running, it's just $5 a month, or that we have higher ones. If you want to get some swag, I'll send you a t-shirt or something. Or you could just do the $5 and get access to episodes earlier than everybody else. So that would be great. Today, our guest, I'm so excited about this one because I had this idea back around Christmas time that I would like to interview a couple of people who are very special to me. Today is one of those calls. She is somebody who I've spent a lot of time with. She is a little bit fiery. You'll find that. And she is my grandmother, Harriett Miller. Grandma, welcome to Halfway There.
Thank you very much, Eric.
I'm so glad to have you here. It's exciting. You, when I first asked you, were like, I don't know, but you made it. You made it on the call.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So, all right. So I want to tell us a little bit about you. Are you doing okay? I know that, hopefully this is all over when we put this out, but you're doing all right with the whole pandemic going on.
So far, it gets kind of lonely, but that's just part of it. And it's one of those things that you have to get through, like everything else in life.
Yeah.
But I'm getting the things I need, and so that's much as we can do right now.
Right. That's the most important part for sure. I want to talk about some of your story and go back. So let's, now you did you grow up your whole life in Des Moines, Iowa?
Yes.
I
was born here.
Okay.
Raised here. Went to school here, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. I remember that little house, and I don't remember where that house is. I could probably drive there if I was in town, but I haven't lived in Des Moines for 20 years. But did you live in that house, Grandpa's house, your whole life, or?
Grandfather John, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No. We moved all over the city of Des Moines. I never lived there.
Oh, you didn't?
I was already married by the time they moved there.
Oh, gotcha. I didn't know that. See, I'm learning things already. Okay. What was your life growing up?
Oh dear. I was of course born and raised here in Des Moines. It was during the Depression, and things were pretty tight, pretty hard. Sometimes we were hungry. Sometimes it was Dad's work was sporadic, and as I said, we moved a lot.
What did he do?
What did he do? He was a carpenter.
Okay.
He was also he was a man of a lot of trades. He could do just an awful lot of things, and but even then, it was jobs were hard to find, and so we were pretty poor, and I guess that's kind of. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but it was difficult.
Were your family believers at all?
No. Well, if I go back, maybe I go back to before, like my dad's mother and dad. I don't know about his father, but his mother was a Quaker, was raised in a Quaker home.
Oh, interesting.
They came over here with one of William Penn's colonies.
Oh, wow.
And so when she married my grandfather, I'm not sure yet about the story, but they said that he told her she could no longer go to the Quaker meetings, and so she started going to a Methodist church. I don't know too much about his background as far as his religious training, but there were things that I heard over the years that made me wonder if he didn't go to Sunday school, but we never really talked about it. On Mother's side of the family, I don't know much of anything about my grandfather, but my grandmother was, oh dear, I can't even think. It's not Pentecostal, and mother was raised in a Pentecostal church, and I understand that she was saved at the age of 16. But she married my father when she was 17, and he was not a believer, and things were never very smooth.
Oh,
and so I spent a lot of time in my grandmother's home, and I can remember going to church and Sunday school as a child. I think I always knew who Jesus was. I knew that he was God's son. I knew that I was a sinner. I needed to be saved, that he died on the cross. I knew all of that growing up. But a lot of the time I did not go to church or Sunday school, and I don't recall my parents going. As I got a little older and old enough, we had those good news clubs in the neighborhood that we would go to during the summer. And then a lady from the Salvation Army, Captain Schultz, started picking us up and taking us to the community center, and it was a church as well. And I ended up, she got a lot of band instruments, and I learned to play the B-flat bass horn. And when we got good enough, they took us out on the street, and they passed out leaflets and things like that. I can remember doing that kind of thing.
And how old were you then?
Huh?
How old were you?
Well, I would have been in grade school, and then probably junior high.
Okay.
And then we moved again out of that area and into over on the east side. And there was a lady a couple of doors over that went to the Apostolic Faith Assembly Church, and she started picking us up, and a couple of my sisters and my cousin who lived just down the street. And we went there. I went there through the first year in high school. So I had, I knew as I said, I already knew and understood who Jesus was. I'm not certain I was a Christian, but I would have argued with you if you tried to tell me anything different, because I knew that was true. And
yeah, so that's interesting because you have it's a wide swath of different traditions that you just mentioned, right? So
yes,
from Methodist to Charismatic to Salvation Army, like all of that, very interesting, and Apostolic even, they're interesting too. So that's kind of a smorgasbord of different denominational influences. You thought you were a Christian, so how did you decide for sure that you were?
No, I don't think I.
You don't think you were, but you would have thought you were at the time. You said.
No, I don't really think I was. I don't know. I don't know really what I thought, except that I knew. All through high school, I know that the girls that were my friends were the Christian girls. So it's kind of difficult to, but no, I didn't. Well, let's see. I would say I was about 33 when I really accepted Jesus as my Savior.
Oh wow! Okay.
So I'd already married and had children, and my husband had died, and all of that.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I want to hear that, but tell me some of those stories, because so before you get to that, because fill in those gaps. So high school, what happened after high school? By the way, I should say this. You and I went to the same high school.
Yes, we did. East High.
That's right. Dear East High.
Yeah. Okay, I graduated from high school, which was a miracle in itself because my parents would not have cared if I quit. And I think the only thing that kept me from doing so, I had a junior high teacher who I was always I would bring my excuse for being absent, but I would never pick up the little pink slip afterwards. I don't know why. There was a block, something. And one day she said to me, Harriet, you are so dumb you will never finish high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that was the thing. I would think that, and I said, no, there am not any way I'm going to let her be right. And so I finished high school.
That's a little of that family stubbornness.
Yes. It's a broad streak. I was hired at the telephone company, but we didn't have a phone, and we lived way out on the southeast side of Des Moines, and there was no transportation, and the hours were erratic, and I couldn't take the job. So I ended up moving into Des Moines with my aunt. My cousin was we were very, very strongly connected. We would get to talking or we would start laughing about something when we knew exactly what the other one was thinking. And anyway, I moved in there and so that I could work. But by that time, I don't know, I was just barely 17 when I graduated. And
was that early?
Yes.
Okay.
I had gone to summer school 2 summers, so I graduated early.
Did you want to graduate? Like that was something you were after, or what?
I'm not sure. Yes, I think I did, but I just didn't. I don't know. Anyway, while we were living there, my aunt had a nursing home, and we would help her in the nursing home. And I found a job and started working. And my cousin had worked for a dental laboratory, and one of the young men that was there, she gotten acquainted with pretty well, and she met him again after I graduated, and anyway, she got talking to him, and they usually went right down the street where we lived, and they had motorbikes to him and his buddy, and so they told her to let us know where we lived. So she had to go in, so she told me to yell at them when they went by, which I did. And they stopped, and we got acquainted, and I started dating Don in October. We were married the following October, and the following October after that, David was born. Your old uncle.
Oh yeah, that's an eventful couple of years there.
Yeah, it was difficult. He was only 19 when we got married, and looking back on it now, he just wasn't. Marriage was fine, but a family, he wasn't ready to settle down. Maybe that's not quite the word, but we had a difficult time at that time because of it. And
what does that mean? Relationally, or?
Yeah, relationally. I mean,
Gotcha.
It was just we just didn't. Like I said, he wasn't ready for a family, and it got pretty hard. And so anyway, things smoothed out a little probably after David was probably a year or so old. And then later, we were able to buy our own home, and he wanted to then go. By that time, I think he was beginning to grow up, shall we say, And I realize that now, as an older adult. Why then I can look back on it and see what the problem was. But anyway, he wanted to go ahead and have another child, which we did, and that was your grandfather.
Yay. My dad. My dad.
Yep. And then after that, we had there was about 5 years there, and I had a medical problem, shall we say, and the doctor told me that I was going through menopause. I was 25 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so he said he put me on estrogen, and he said that would get me through the worst of it. And he said, and get out of that house and go to work. And I did.
Oh, wow.
And my sister came and lived with us to watch after the boys. I mean, Dave was in school. Her dad wasn't. And so anyway, she took care of the kids while I went to school, while I worked. And
yeah, I want to ask some other questions.
Okay.
First of all, so your sister, which sister was that?
Bruce.
Aunt Boo. Okay. We call her Aunt Boo.
Aunt Boo. Yeah.
Where did she get that nickname?
I don't. I think maybe it was David. He couldn't say Ruth. He said, Boo. No, it was your dad. He couldn't say Ruth. He said Booth. And so it became Boo, Aunt Boo.
Aunt Boo. Okay. Yep. Well, that's how I've always known her my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she can be a little scary if you aren't careful. She'll get you. But so she was living with you. But I wanted to ask about Don, I guess my grandpa. I never knew him, but what was his background?
I don't think he had ever been in a church.
He had no church. Okay.
Until we were married, the day we were married, and not again.
Wow. Okay. So there's no faith going on there. And it sounds like in your life, there just probably wasn't any faith. It was just.
Yeah. I would maybe laying there at night and not being able to go to sleep or something. And I'd think the verse would pop into my head that the Lord can come back in the moment and a twinkling of an eye. And I would panic. Lord, you can't come back yet. I'm not ready. I knew.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So, no, there were, but again, like my parents, they let them go to church. Dave and Rick, and then Doug went to Indianola Heights. And I didn't, but it wasn't until Don got sick that the youth pastor started, he came down and started talking to me, and he wanted my background, and I gave him, some of what I told you. And during the time that he was ill, he was diagnosed with cancer in probably January or February of 1964. And he, at that time, they told me that, well, to begin with, they thought it was just a bleeding ulcer. And I found a lump under his arm, left arm, and I said cancer. I just knew that's what it was. And so when I talked to his doctor, I finally got through to them that he wasn't out of bed from the time I brought him home from the hospital. He'd been in for the bleeding ulcer, and he just didn't seem to get any better, and he was still in bed 2 weeks later. And so they suggested that, when I talked to the doctor and finally got through to him that what was going on, he said, well, if he's not better by Monday, he said, we'll get him in here and get some more tests done. And But on Monday, I had the grocery store, and when I got home, my mother-in-law was living with me, with us at that time. She was 82, and she told me, she said, "You better get in there." She said, "There's something wrong." He was babbling, and his tongue was just sticking in his mouth. And I called an ambulance and sent him to the hospital, and I took off. And so when the intern came in, and I told him, I said, "You may think I'm crazy, but I think it's cancer." And he said, "I think so too." And so he had surgery. They said he would have been dead within 3 days if they didn't do the surgery on his brain. And after the surgery, the doctor came out, and with the intern, with Dr. Schulteis, and resident, I should say, and he was talking to me, and I, kind of beating around the bush. And Dr. Schulteis says, he said, "Take off the kid gloves. She's the one who told me it was cancer." And it made the doctor mad, and he looked at him and glared, and he looked at me, and he said, "He's got 6 months to a year to live."
Mm. What did that do to you?
And knowing it was cancer, I'd already been through it with my uncle and my grandmother and a couple of others, and I knew what was coming. And it was like, oh no, 6 months to a year, that's going to be a long time. Now that sounds crazy. Most people would probably think the opposite. But thinking what he would be going through, I didn't panic, but it was just, it just hit. And I knew that, like I said, I knew what was coming. And so, at any rate, we discussed what to do. And a little while later, a few days later, while the doctor and I were talking, and he was telling me things I could do, and I explained to him that I'd already told the boys, not as much as you can tell them, that Daddy was sick and he might not be with us long. And anyway, I called the school and talked to them and told them that what was going on, and I told them that I wanted to know if they would let me know if they saw anything, because they might see things going on before I did, and I needed to know it if that was true, because I was spending a lot of time at the hospital with him, and till we finally got him home, and it was, at any rate, it was, I think, during that time period, I lost count at 80 transfusions.
Oh, wow.
And he would not allow them to even do it until I got there. So they would call me at home and say, "Harriet, the blood's up." And so I'd head for the hospital and sit there all day. He would not talk. I just had to be there. So it was very difficult. And the family, his family, my family, his friends, all seemed to be coming apart at the seams, and somebody had to stay strong. And so I thought it was me.
And that was you. Yeah.
And that was me.
That doesn't surprise me, knowing you.
Yeah.
So, okay, tell me about telling the boys, though. What was that like?
Huh?
Tell me about telling the boys, because I don't think I've ever heard that story.
I'm not sure they really, they saw him, going back and forth between the hospital. He was never out of bed again. He would get up maybe for meals, or maybe sit in the living room for a little while. They saw him go through seizures on more than one occasion. They were right there.
Mm.
But I thought...
How old were they?
Well, okay, they would have been... they were 3, 4, 6, and 11. Or, no, yeah, 3, 4, 6, 11, and 14 when he died.
Okay.
So they would have been a year younger than that.
Yeah.
So 2, 3, 5... so the little ones really, they don't really remember him. The 2 older boys, your dad and Dave, both do. Because, like I said, they were 11 and 14 when he died.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much it really, like I said, the little ones, I don't think it really ever registered. because they don't really remember him. Doug does a little, but the other two don't at all. And but Dave and I think at the funeral was the first time your dad just came. He just started sobbing. He couldn't get his breath.
Mm.
And that was more of a panic than anything for me. And but at any rate, they. But during this time, the youth pastor, was with me, and we talked a lot about the Lord and what my beliefs were and everything. And I told him that when it was over, I would go back to church. And he died the 21st on a Sunday, and the following Sunday, I was in church.
Wow.
So
what month was that?
What was that?
What month was that? That he died? What was the 21st?
Oh, he died the 21st of February in 65.
Okay.
And on the 28th, I was in church. I walked into the church for the first time on all those years with my 5 sons. And the youth pastor looked at me and said, "Harriet, you're here." And I said, "I told you I wouldn't." He said, "Well, yeah, you did." But he said that was a few weeks later. He said, "You're the first person who ever told me they would do that and actually did." That's why he was so shocked.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised by that either. You were like, "Yeah, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be there."
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it was something I wanted, definitely. I wanted to be in church.
Okay, so how do you think that when Grandpa Don died, was God speaking to you through that? Was God like, I mean, obviously he didn't cause it. But what was your relationship with God like through that?
I don't think I would have ever come to know the Lord as my Savior if he hadn't been taken out of the way.
Wow.
I know I know that maybe not sounds right, but that's the way I look at it, because I just know that's true. He was a very controlling person. Mm. And I don't think I would have ever, and the pastor himself came down and talked to him because he wanted to make sure that somebody had talked to him about the Lord. And when he came out, he said, "Well, at least he believes in God." But I knew right then it had not gone through. And actually, I'm not sure whether this is something I should say, but when he died, the resident came in and I probably looked many years younger than I was. I was, like I said, I was 32 at that time, and I probably looked more like 18, 20, something like that. And you could see the look on his face. It was like, "Oh my God, she's so young. Mm. And what am I going to say?" And so what he did was put the sheet up over his head, symbolic of they're gone.
Yeah.
And I said, he's dead. And he said, yes. And so then he left. And as we were standing there, I saw this very faint ripple of the sheet. It started at his feet, and it started going up the sheet and out over his head. And I said to my mother, I said, "That's his spirit leaving."
Wow.
I just knew that was what it was. And I pray I'm wrong, but I'm sure he was not saved.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Well,
but it doesn't. Go ahead.
Well, it's just an interesting, so it's such a mixed story, right? I mean, obviously it's sad. And I would love to also think that he knew the Lord. Maybe someday I'll get to meet him, but also that God used that circumstance to kind of get a hold of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he's always had his hand on me, because I could have gotten in trouble many times over the years and didn't.
Right.
So I think he kind of, I was his from the beginning.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that because I don't think I've ever heard that story in as much detail.
There's not too many people who have.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's very, very special. So thank you. Okay. So you showed up in church and you said, okay. So did you, it doesn't sound to me like you had any kind of personal like moment. You just, as things were developing, you knew God, you were trusting him and you said, okay, now I'm going to go to church. Is
Hmm.
that true?
I think so, probably.
Yeah.
Get back to church. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Right. And you just knew that you were his.
I I think now, yes,
Mm.
definitely that I was his
Yeah.
all along.
Interesting. Okay. Well, so that's a tough spot to be in. A widow with 5 boys, young boys, especially as rowdy as I know some of them are. I only have 3
Yeah.
boys, since I can't imagine doing that. How? And you were already working, right? So were you still working then? I'm assuming.
No.
Oh,
When after I went back to work after Doug was born, but when I got pregnant with Dale, that was it, because I had lost one in between Doug and Dale. I was
oh,
just about maybe 6-8 weeks along,
okay.
and then Roger was born about a year. In fact, 2 days less than a year after Dale was born. So there was no way of 5
Oh, yeah.
boys going to work. I had my Social Security. My home was paid for. So that after he died, I was able to pay the house off,
Oh, okay.
and and I did babysitting. Actually, the week that the 28th was when I went to church. I took my sister's 4 children into my home to take. The youngest was 6 months old, and took care of her 4. The 2 went to school with my boys. I had them during the week, and then they went home on the weekend to her.
Oh, wow.
And so there was no chance of working at that point. I mean, you babysitting fees alone, or
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't have done it.
Right. So that makes sense. So I didn't know that. So how did you support yourself? Just by babysitting your
But with
sister's
the
kids?
Social Security and babysitting, yes.
Oh, I see. Oh, you got Social Security from Don.
Yes.
Yeah, I see.
Yes. Right.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, that's good, I guess. So, okay, so you were going through that. Did you guys get involved in church, or like what happened for
Oh,
spiritually
yeah.
for you after that?
Oh, okay. I well, to begin with, the 2 little ones had never been away from home, and they were afraid. And I had to sit with them in Sunday school class in order to keep them there.
Oh,
So
wow.
the first few weeks, I could not go to church. But I don't know whether it was the first or second Sunday that when they gave the altar call, I can remember I was sitting on the aisle, and the leg of the pew was right there. And I remember putting my purse back under the pew. And if they'd said ready, set, go, I would have ran.
You were ready.
I was ready.
Wow.
And I accepted Christ as my Savior at that point. But I still didn't. I wasn't sure. And I had to know. They gave me a book by David C. Cook that's Now That I Believe. And there was a chapter in there on praying through. And what I took from the chapter was, if you want to know an answer to something, get down on your knees and pray until you get the answer. And I decided I was going to do that. And so I turned the TV off about midnight, went in beside my bed and knelt and started to pray. I got to a point where I couldn't move 1 inch, not even that, and needles would just shoot through me. But I was determined, and I just kept praying, and pretty soon I started getting drowsy, and I couldn't, and I was fighting sleep and pain, and the Lord spoke to me audibly.
What did he say? Yeah, tell me that.
Let all things be known unto you that I am your Lord, thy God. It was just like we're speaking. I heard his voice. I jumped up and I looked across the bed to the clock, and it was exactly 3:00. And I was ecstatic, and I was whirling around the bed. Anybody'd see me, they thought I was nuts. But it was, and I had gone through a new believers class with the pastor, and one of the things he had said was, "The Lord speaks to you, call somebody." And I'm thinking, who do I call at 3:00 in the morning?
Right.
So I went to bed, went to sleep promptly, got up the next morning. I felt great, and went on from there.
Yeah. And so that was assurance for you.
Absolutely. But as time went on, I realized it may have meant more.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, it was a long. To begin with, after I was saved, I knew a lot about the Bible stories and everything. I'd heard them over the years, and I knew a lot of them. And but I decided that I was going to have to read the Bible from cover to cover before I would know even glimpse the mind of Christ, of God. So I started with Genesis 1:1 and started through. And so it was, and every time I would get a minute, I was reading my Bible. I got over to, so it would have been several months later, I got over to 1 John, the second chapter, and as I was reading, verse 20 came, and I pulled this out because I thought this might come up or might be brought up. And it says, "But you have an unction or an anointing from the Holy One, and ye know all things." But the anointing, but 27, then, that verse, the 20 just popped off the page at me.
Oh, yeah.
And so then I got over to 27, and again, it said, "But the anointing which ye have received of him abideth in you, and ye need not that any man teach you, but as the same anointing teaches you of all things, and is truth, and is no lie, and even as it hath taught you, ye shall abide in him." And I thought, okay, there's something more there. At that point, I'd already, no, I wouldn't have. Anyway, I just felt there was, because there had been things happening that I seemed to know, and I didn't know why I knew.
And this is the passage that the Lord spoke to you, and it seems like it kind of shaped your life, and maybe even as a gifting.
I knew later. I realized that I had the gift of discernment.
Gotcha.
And when things are wrong, not necessarily in day-to-day world, but where the church is concerned, if there's a problem, I know it.
Gotcha.
And I've never, so it's just something that I know, and it seems like I get some way, I get all the details. I don't want the details, but I get them.
Okay. Well, that's kind of an interesting gift.
Yes, it is, and one I've never really known how to use, and I've never known that. I've never felt that I was to use it. I was just to know it, and that doesn't make a lot of sense either.
That's interesting. So you've never felt like, okay, so there's something wrong over here, and maybe we should go do something about it. You never felt like I was asking you to do that. He just was letting you know. Like, so what do you do with it? You pray or what?
Yeah, but I didn't know what to. The couple of times that I did, they were going to hire. When this was after Bill and I got married, because that was 3 years after Don died. I remarried, and we went to Covenant where he was going to church. And they were going to hire a young woman for the children's ministry. And Bill and I were heavily into the children's ministry. And she came out to the house to talk to us and go over what we were doing and a lot of different things. Well, but anyway, when they were going to hire her, there was this feeling she doesn't belong in this church. She shouldn't be hired. And everything that I could think of, they brought up and discussed and dismissed. So they hired her, and like I said, she came out to the house. And after we talked for probably a couple of hours, and Bill and her and I, and when she got ready to leave, she was standing at the door, and she said, "Harriet, I know there's something wrong between the two of us, but I just don't know what it is." And she said, at any rate, I wanted to lie to her, and I knew I couldn't. So as kindly as you can say something like that, I said, "Lois, I don't believe you belong in that position." And she said, "Well, then we can't work together." Wow. I said, "No." I said, "You are in that position, and I will do everything I can to make things work." And she said, "Well, then, okay, then it's okay." And I said, "Yes." Sometime later, there were couple of things that happened. We had a young woman. She and her husband were expecting their first baby, and he was killed. And so she, anyway, the boy was in my group, in my class, in my Sunday school class. And anyway, she met this man, not a Christian. Her Christian friend said, "Don't marry him." Her non-Christian friend said that was stupid, Well, she married him, and they just got married. They were not married in the church. I don't know where they got married, but they did. And they were gone for a couple of weeks. And she brought Jay into the classroom. And the minute I saw her, I said, and Lois was standing there, and Bill, and I said, "Uh-oh, there's trouble in paradise." And they looked at me and, "What are you talking about? The guy just got married." I said, "I don't care." I said, "There's trouble already." And sure enough, within a month, they were separated.
Oh, wow.
And there was another time, there was something else, and I won't go into that, but a second time. And we were standing in the hallway one day, and she said, "Harriet," she said, "you have an uncanny ability to zero in on things long before other people do." She said, "But you're going to have to be awfully careful because you know things before other people are ready to hear them."
Yeah. That is one of the problems with that gift, isn't it?
Yes.
You have to, because you have to discern not only, what's happening, but also when the right time to say something is.
Right. I did one time after they'd gotten rid of our pastor, and they had brought another one. The other man had come in, and one of the lay people and he were working on a program for the church to get things started, and it was a wonderful program. And so, we met as a church group, and then they put us in groups of like 3, and to talk about it. And I made the comment to them. I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. And I said, "It's a wonderful program. I think it's marvelous, but it's not going to go anywhere until they take care of the sin in this church." They blew up at me.
I bet it was difficult.
But it was true because, later the one of them came back and apologized. In fact, it was far enough out that I didn't even realize to begin with what she was talking about. But she knew then that I had known what was going to happen. It just was not going to go anywhere. I always thought if the Lord's in it, any program can work. But if he's not, the best program won't necessarily work.
Right.
So
yeah, definitely needs the Lord to be there and blessing it, right?
Right.
Oh, interesting. Oh, and you could tell. Okay, well, that's pretty fascinating, Grandma. I didn't know all that about you.
Yeah, well, that's something I've dealt with for years. I'm right now dealing with a situation that I don't feel I can say anything about, but I know it's true. The Lord has shown me time and time again on this situation what the situation is, but I just don't. But it's not anything I can really say or do anything about. I think there's enough people have to see or had to see what was going on that they've ignored, but I can't. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know about that as a gift that you had. So, okay. Well, so yeah, you mentioned earlier that you did eventually get remarried. I didn't know the timeline exactly. So 3 years. You had small kids, right? I guess I did know the timeline because Dad was 14, right, when that happened.
So yeah, he would have been about 14.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because David was 17. So that's been about the right. I was engaged to a man during the first year, and the Lord told me and audibly he said, "Give him up."
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And yeah, he told me to give him up, but Lord, I don't understand. I knew there was a divorce, and I knew some of the circumstances behind it. She had another man's child, and I had understood that would negate the marriage, but that was not his. And I said, Lord, I don't understand. Well, a little while, it wasn't a few days later, the verse came to me: "He who marries a divorced woman causes her to commit adultery." And I said, "But Lord, that's a man." And he, in a very stern voice, not audibly, but yet audibly, not like we're talking, but it was audible to me. "I have no double standard." Now read it again. Oops. Okay. "She who marries a divorced man causes him to commit adultery." So anyway, then I went and talked to the pastor, and he said, "I know the pastor. I'll talk to him." And he came back a few days later, and he said, "Harriet, you do not want to get mixed up in that." And so I called off the engagement.
Oh, wow.
And I thought maybe the Lord wasn't going to let me get married, because every time I would read an article, it would be on second marriages, and poor children were concerned that the mortality rate of such marriages was very high. And so when David was planning on going to Trinity, and so there were paperwork that the pastor had to sign or had to fill out, and I didn't want to. Our pastor had left, and the new pastor had only been there a very short time, and I wasn't sure about whether they would, how to fill it out. So I took the paperwork up and talked to him, and I was going to maybe send it on to our former pastor, and he said no, there's enough people here that can help. So, any rate, so he said, "Do you date at all, Harriet?" I said, "I have, but I'm not now." So anyway, the upshot was he and pastor from the Covenant Church got the two of us together. And they're playing matchmakers, I guess, which is not maybe a thing they ought to do. But at any rate, the first evening we met, they had prayer week there were 4 churches that got together in the city of Des Moines. And on the first full week in January, we had prayer week. And so I met the pastor. He got the other pastor, and which was the covenant pastor. And he told me, anyway, he got my testimony, and they got us together. And the first evening, we neither one of us, I don't think either one of us to begin with were impressed. And but we drove around the city of Des Moines for about 3 hours, and I think we discussed everything a couple could possibly discuss. And we knew at the end of that was it. And so we were married. That was the first week in January. We were married the 8th of June. in '68,
Wow.
and almost 35 years.
Yeah.
So,
and he's the one that I knew as Grandpa.
yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah. The boys, the three younger ones came to me before we got married and told me that when I changed my name, they were changing theirs. And they just told everybody their names was Miller from then on. And he eventually, 5 years later, he adopted them. So their name is Miller, where you two, your dad and David are Nevins.
Right. Oh, you know what I forgot to, I thought of this, but I forgot to bring it up, is that when you first just had the two boys, that you guys went by, because you're Harriet.
Yeah.
And you have David and Ricky.
Yes.
Right. And then
Donald Osmond Nevins.
Yeah. And so
and his dad's name was Ozzy. So
wow.
Ozzy Harriet.
Go ahead. Yeah, do it.
No, I didn't. No, it was strictly accidental. I didn't. In fact, I had other names planned, and Don said no, and I finally came up with David, and then with Rick. Actually, I named him Ricky Dean to begin with, and it was, and when we had to get the birth certificates for when Don was sick and we were going to get on Social Security, I decided Ricky was crazy for a little kid. I had the choice of Eric on the Aussie, the Nelson program. His name is Eric Hilliard Nelson, and so I had either Richard or Eric, and my brother's name was Richard, so I didn't think I should do that. So I had it amended to Eric.
Oh, wow.
At that time. So it's on his birth certificates, it says Ricky, and then it's a line through it, and it says Eric, or amended Eric.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I just always think that's it's just a fun story. So, I don't know if you know this. So, sorry, this is about me, not you. But the night before I went to high school, I went to go. It was late. Like it was the first day of school. The next day, it's like 10:30. We're down at the fairgrounds, and you'll never guess who's playing the fairgrounds that night. Matthew and Gunnar Nelson, the twin sons of Ricky Nelson. Isn't that funny? So because of that, I've always felt a little connection to them and then also Ricky Nelson.
And that a lot of people have brought up the fact that was what we had done, but no, it wasn't planned.
You didn't do it on purpose?
No, I did not. It was just, that's the way it just turned out.
Sure. That's fine. I think it's kind of cool anyway. So it sounds like you had some pretty good, strong giftings right away. You got involved in church after you gave your life to Christ after Grandpa Don died. And then, it sounds like, and I know Grandpa, Bill, I guess I'm going to call him, you guys were like really consistent, right? Because I think you gave me, when he died, some like Sunday school attendance awards. Like he was a teacher.
Oh yeah, long string of them.
Yeah.
In fact, they quit giving them because we were the only ones who were getting them.
Right. So you guys were really consistent, and you became kind of the backbone, and you were there. So that's interesting. How were there any other moments like that I don't know to ask about for you that God either spoke to you or was?
Well, yeah. Over in Isaiah 54, I was reading my Bible one night, and the verses in that chapter started, different ones popping off the page at me. So I went back several times, and each time more verses kept popping up. But it was the first three that just did not seem to fit. So finally, I started at verse 4. And when I did, it was just like my heart felt like it just expanded, and I got like as big as a water bucket. It was just amazing. And as I read all the way through to the end, I knew it was a promise to me that all my sons would be taught of the Lord, and great would be the peace of my children. And I've prayed with that many times where the boys are concerned. Lord, they have to be walking with you to be at peace. But the whole thing, it's that whole chapter, except for the first 3 verses, that I've marked as my promise.
And okay, well, that's why I was wondering. Like, I was curious how you took that, because I'm not, like I said, I don't really know those 3 brothers. Certainly after we left Iowa, I see family twice a year, maybe, and them.
And then they don't sound like it, do they?
No, not really. Not necessarily.
And that bothers me too.
And so I wanted to know how you felt about that. Like what you like, so because this promise, this, like you've taken this on as you believe the Lord's saying this to you. And I don't have any reason to question that, but then I'm curious how you reckon with it, because it's I know there's a disparity.
It's just something that I have to rely on the Lord. He doesn't lie. He made the promise, and he will keep it.
Right.
So that's the way I go at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just pray for them, and Lord, they're in your hands. You're yours. So
like we all are. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, Grandma. Okay. Have you ever questioned God? Like, did you ever have a time when you just thought, like, felt like you were angry with him, or you felt like he was not holding up his end of the bargain?
I didn't know it, but when David had his accident, and the young man was killed, you're not aware of that?
I think I've heard of it, but I don't recall that story at all.
Well,
really.
No, you were. Yeah, well, it was, he just turned 21.
Okay.
And any rate, he was actually convicted of involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 8 years with 2 years suspended sentence. And he got through that, of course, with flying colors. There was no problem. When Doug had his accident and the young woman was killed, I thought, because I had to go through the trial and all that, and I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I lost a lot of weight. I just and I just couldn't understand why. But at the same time, the Lord gave me the verse, it's for a future and a hope. I didn't understand it, but okay, I had to accept that. But when Doug had the accident, I said, no, Lord, I can't go through this again. I just can't. And I was fasting. And I was working at the time, and the lady that I was working with, or was working for, was a close friend of mine. And she went must have been about the 3rd day, why she said, "Are you fasting, Harriet?" Yeah. And anyway, she went out to lunch, and while she was out to lunch, I was praying again, and the Lord showed me that I was angry with him over David's accident. And I didn't realize I was. But once we got that straightened out, that very evening, when we went into church, it was on a Wednesday evening, and the pastor came and was so happy about everything. We hadn't even turned on the radio. We got home, got something to eat, and went to church. We both were working, and they had just announced that OSHA had come in and checked the vehicles for the city were not in, and they shouldn't have been on the street, and they had to rent vehicles to even work. And after that, they completely exonerated him.
Oh, wow.
So it was not his. It was no way his fault. And but that had to be straightened out first.
Yeah,
my being angry, and but he said I was, and I have to accept that. If he said I was, I was. So anyway, but,
well, interesting. Yeah, it can definitely be a thing that you may not have been aware of, and just kind of festering there. And it took another incident to kind of bring it to the fore. Wow. Did Uncle David do some time?
No.
Oh.
He was given a 2-year suspended sentence.
Oh, 2 years
suspended. And the young man that he was his probation officer was 2 years older.
Oh, wow.
And they used to accidentally meet on the golf course or accidentally meet at the bowling alley during the 2 years. And David was still with Hy-Vee. They kept him in the Air Guard.
Gotcha. Okay.
They had to get special mission, So he never suffered. But I knew if he went to prison, it would ruin him.
Oh, yeah. That would be tough. All right. Okay.
So, but if he had, there would have been nothing I could have done anyway. But
interesting. Okay. Well, Grandma, thank you so much for sharing all this. These are the kinds of stories that I love to hear. And I just hear a quiet but strong and fierce faith from you. God has used you for sure, not only in my life. I know you've been very, very kind to others, certainly in some of their hardest moments, and that probably comes from your own having to live through some hard moments. But I just want to say I love you and thank you.
I love you too, sweetie.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
No, just that right now we're going through some difficult times with this, and we just pray that we get through it together, and I'm sure we will. And the Lord's got His hand on it regardless.
He does. He always does.
No matter what happens.
And He's always working even when we can't. So.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Grandma.
Okay. Bye-bye.